Welcome everyone to today's video. Today's video will be covering variables and functions a little bit more in depth because last time we did this serialized field text and we're declaring that. Well, what the heck is that? And if you remember, I said that that video was pretty much just an overview of just how C# and Unity interact with each other. Okay, so don't worry about it, but now we'll go a little bit again more in depth in variables, so you understand a little better what that was. Okay, what we really did. Now let's begin. So basically variables have different types. We have strings and we have integers and we have many more, but for this tutorial I'm just going to cover strings and ints, but it's pretty much the concepts of the same for all of them. So now let's say string story, and let's just make the man went into the forest, blah 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 blah. Okay, that's just an example. This can be named whatever, but it's a good idea that you give meaningful names to your strings or variables. So now let's say whole num, and then let's make it 4 now. What integers are is basically int stands for integer, and integer is a whole number, right? This is a whole number. You wouldn't be able to say 4.3. If you wanted to say 4.3 or basically numbers with floating points, then you would use float. But again, we won't cover that now because we don't really care about that now. But we will be using floats in the next tutorials for sure, when we go more into physics, using the physics engine and all that good stuff. For now, don't worry. Now, what we did here is, actually, if you look into this part here, it's pretty similar to that over here. We're literally saying equal some text. What that means is this dot text field is a text, or even if we hover that, you see that this is string, that this is of type string. So basically this text is a string, and we can say story, and then let's copy that out. Let's continue the story into the forest and saw an old man. Whatever, let's continue the story after that again. Now this story has just been overwritten, the content into it, in it. So now if we say debug.log, now I'm going to show you what debug does and why it's really useful. Now let's run it. Let's click play, and if you go into that console here and click on click me, you see that the man went into the forest and saw an old man. Basically we printed whatever was in the story to the console, and basically that's what debug log does really. It just prints whatever you pass into the parentheses to the console. And you'd be asking, but why is debug.log really useful? Because why would we ever use it? We already know the values. Yes, you know it now, but if your program was very complex, or let's say you had a game with tens of hundreds of files or whatever, believe me, you wouldn't really know what's in that story necessarily. More specifically, you would know, you think that you know, but chances are there will be something else. So you would use debug.log just to check if you're correct. Okay, but again, we'll be using debug.log throughout the whole series, so you will definitely understand what it does. For now, don't worry about it. So yeah, basically this .text is a string. This color is a variable again of type color, and of type color basically this color is an enumerator, which we won't cover now, but just think of it as a special kind of variable that has been written in this unity.engine.ui, and this is a namespace, and basically namespace provide us with different functionality like methods or like variables or whatever, but we won't care about that now. But so this is one type of variable, this is another type of variable. So this is of type string, this is of type color. Simple as that. So basically, why do we have different types of variables? Well, let's say we wanted to debug dot log, and then let's say whole num plus 5. Now it wouldn't be logical to say story plus 5, right? It just doesn't make sense. But when we're saying whole num plus 5, which is a 4, plus 5, it's 9. It's basic addition. So what I'm trying to say is different types of variables provide you with different functionality. So that's why it's useful to have all of them, or many of them, or whatever. You get what I'm saying? So now, even if I run that now, and if I click on click me, you see 9, because 5 plus 4 is 9. And let's come here and say whole num, make it 6. And now let's copy that line over here. Now let's run it. So basically what we did was overriding the whole num's value to 6, and then let's run it now. Click, and you see that now it's 11, because here it was 4, now it is 6, and basically we changed the value to 6, and now 6 plus 5 is 11. Okay, to delete that. So that would be really it for variables for now. Now here you see this text, right? This text represents the type of the variable. So this is string, this is text, different types. So this type gives different functionality. So basically it has this dot color. Then if we reference this text object and we just type dot, you see all of the functionality that this type text gives us. You know, you can change the canvas, or all of these variables you can change them, because this text type gives us that functionality. Int wouldn't have that functionality, neither would string have that functionality, but text has it. Again, different types, different functionalities. Now let's go to functions a little bit. They're really similar in some aspects to the variables, and functions, let's say public, and when you specify public, that means that it can be referenced out. This function can be used outside of that class. So let's say public, and then print something, and then let's debug log printing whatever, right? Now let's copy that out, paste it a couple of times. No, please don't. Yep, thank you, Visual Studio. I don't need you now. There we go. Now here what we're missing is the type. Now just like variables, it needs a type. As I said, methods have similar concepts to variables, so it needs a type. And this is the name, this is the type, this is the type, this is the name, right? Now what is void? Well, void means that we are not expecting a value returned from that function. What I mean, well, let's say you want to call a function that you want to get the number 5, and you're literally saying, hey function, give me the number 5, but when we're not returning anything, which is void, we're saying, no, I'm not returning anything and you're not getting 5. Well, let's say that we want to write this function that gives us this number 5. So let's say public int, because we are returning a 5 or a whole number, we need to specify the type, which is an int. So let's say get number 5, and we're saying return 5. Now when we call this function get number 5, we're returning 5, we're giving that 5 value back to the user. So he's happy that he's got his number 5. And what is cool with these non-void functions is that you can store them in a variable. What I mean by that, well, you literally can say int n get number 5. Now n, what do you think n would be equal to? Well, it would be equal to 5, because we're returning that value and we're storing it in n. And now if we say debug.log and then we pass n, and now yep, and then oops, let's rerun our little game here. Yep, run that, click, and you see 5. Well, because if you double click on it, you see debug.log and n is get number 5, and it returns 5. Now why do you think it has public? Because if you had private, I mean, you can have both public and private. Private means that you won't be able to access that method outside of that script, outside of that class. And most of the times for functions, you would want to use private public methods. I'm sorry. This name doesn't exist. Oh yeah, I deleted it. My bad. And just like with functions, in variables you can also specify the private type. I mean not the type, but whatever that was called. I forgot, but doesn't matter right now. But you can specify it as private, and you can also specify it as public. But you don't need to specify it as public because it's by default specified as public. But it's a good practice that you make your variables, instance variables, these are called instance variables, initialized to private. And the reason that is because you wouldn't be able to um, directly have a reference to these variables here and outside of this class. And that's a cool thing that you don't have this access. You would want to write getter and setter methods for each variable that you have that will be public methods, and that public method will give the functionality of accessing these variables, either getting them or setting them. And what I mean by that is basically, let's say public void set story text, and let's say story new story, and then let's say public string get story text, and then let's just return that story. As you can see, we're returning a string. That's why we're specifying string here, right? We're returning that back to the user, back to the caller. And as you can see here now, we are having this private, but in the same time we can access it using these variables because they're set to public. How cool is that, right? And this whole process is called encapsulation. It just gives you more security. So you would need to stick to that pattern. So you would need, as I said again, you would need setter and getter methods. That's how they're called, because here you're setting the value and here you're getting the value. You're returning that. And as you can see here, we have two variables. Now let's copy paste that and let's make the same thing for the whole number, right? Let's say whole num and let's say 5. Now pause the video and think how you would get the value. Change all of the stuff that you need in this function and unpause it if you got it, or even if you didn't, but try it. At least try, guys. Okay, so now let's say public int and then get whole num, and we're just returning the whole num. Here we change the int from string because this is an int and we're returning this as an int. Okay, we're returning that here. So now we have a way of accessing these private variables outside of this class. So again, functions, variables, very similar. Why would you use functions? Many reasons. One of them is because it makes your code really easy to read. And apart from that, because why did I make this function was because I wanted to show you exactly how it helps you for readability purposes. Let's say print something, right? Now let's copy that, paste it a couple of times, right? Let's paste it here as well. Now let's rerun that. Let's click on play here and click. Yeah, it's printing a whole lot of stuff, so I think that's why it crashed. Oh, okay, I didn't click it. Okay, that's fair enough. So as you can see here, it's printing. A whole lot of printings, right? Now let's delete these. Actually, let me increase the size just so you can see better, right? Now, if you wanted to say to have the same results using not using functions, you have this. This here is the exact same result you're getting if you're using this function. However, as you can see, it's really messy and it's just not clear. And I mean, even if it's clear, it just makes your code really hard to maintain, because it just does. Because if you wanted to change some stuff in these lines, you'd have to change in all of them, whereas if you had this as print something, right? And you needed to change something from that function, all you need to do is just change the print something method, and all of these calls of that function would update as well. So let's say you wanted to only print this twice, so everywhere that you call this function will update and will only call this twice instead of 3 times. So it makes your whole life really easier, and again it makes it more readable and more maintainable. So we will be using functions and variables throughout the whole series. So even if you didn't get all of what I was saying now, you will eventually. So don't worry about that. Just practice what I did. Go open a new script in Visual Studio and just try to replicate what I did here. Try to come up with new examples, and just do it for fun, right? So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye.